What if the most unlikely friend you ever had wasn't quite what they seemed? Imagine a mysterious bird that knows more than it should, watching, listening, waiting. Then, journey deep into the Amazon jungle, where a young woman faces creatures so terrifying they steal faces and vanish into the night. And finally, step into the haunted woods where shadows whisper secrets and a man's fight for survival blurs the line between reality and nightmare. 3 stories, 3 mysteries. Are you ready to uncover what lies beneath the surface? Story 1. The Friend. No One Expected segment title, The Bird Who Knew Too Much. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon in the peaceful suburb of Fairgrove, Oregon, when 37-year-old Nathan Myers heard a knock at his front door. At first, he assumed it was a delivery, but when he opened the door, he was stunned to see Adam Reyes, a man he hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years, and for good reason. Adam had once worked for Nathan at his small home renovation business, but their relationship had soured after a bitter falling out over missing payments and financial disagreements. Nathan had accused Adam of overcharging clients behind his back, while Adam insisted Nathan still owed him for months of unpaid work. The situation had escalated to legal threats before they both went their separate ways. But there he was, Adam, standing on Nathan's porch. And he wasn't alone. Next to him was a younger man Nathan didn't recognize at first, but soon learned was Luis Reyes, Adam's half-brother. Luis had a blank, unreadable expression, and something about the way he scanned the interior of the house made Nathan uneasy. Before Nathan could ask what they wanted, Adam suddenly lunged forward and punched him square in the face. Luis joined in, and within seconds, the 2 men forced their way inside and began brutally attacking Nathan. They punched and kicked him until he collapsed, then dragged his bloodied body into the living room. Using electrical cords from the house, they tied Nathan up and left him slumped against the couch. What happened next was horrific. Adam pulled a large hunting knife from his coat and began stabbing Nathan repeatedly in the torso. Luis joined in, stabbing wherever he could. The level of violence was excessive, even personal, and it likely would have ended there. Just another horrific, unsolved murder in a quiet neighborhood, if not for what happened next. Inside the house, in a back bedroom, was Larry. Larry had been in his cage when the attack started, but could hear everything. And when the noise reached a fever pitch, Larry burst out of his cage, flew straight into the living room, and launched a surprise attack of his own. He screeched at the top of his lungs, flapping wildly in the air before zeroing in on Luis. With astonishing force, Larry bit Luis hard on the side of the face, then again on his neck. The attackers panicked. The flurry of wings, beak, and blood startled them enough that they stopped what they were doing. One of them tried to swat Larry away, but it was too late. In the scuffle, Larry managed to draw blood from Luis, who screamed and stumbled out of the house. Adam followed close behind, and the 2 sped away in a black SUV. When police arrived several hours later, alerted by a neighbor who'd heard screaming but had been too afraid to intervene, they found Nathan dead in his living room. But they also found something else. Perched quietly in the corner of the room was Larry, watching the investigators with intense, intelligent eyes. On his beak was a small but unmistakable smear of blood. Now here's where the story gets absolutely wild. Larry was not a person. He was a cockatoo, a large white parrot with a yellow crest. Nathan had adopted him years ago and named him after basketball legend Larry Bird. To Nathan, Larry was more than a pet. He was a companion, a roommate, and, in many ways, family. And on that day, Larry had become something else, the key witness in a brutal murder. Forensic teams swabbed Larry's beak and ran a DNA test on the dried blood. And incredibly, it came back with a match, Luis Reyes. That single trace of DNA gave investigators the break they needed. Within days, both Adam and Luis were arrested. During questioning, both men eventually confessed. And in court, the strangest piece of evidence entered into the record. the testimony of a bird, or more specifically, the DNA collected from a bird. Today, Larry still lives in Fairgrove. He's under the care of Nathan's sister, and though he doesn't say much anymore, he's known around town as the parrot who solved a murder.
Story 2. Mariana Cortez and the Pelicara. Attack. It was late evening on July 29, 2023, in the remote village of San Isidro, deep within the dense Peruvian Amazon rainforest. The air was thick with humidity, the jungle alive with faint calls of nocturnal creatures. But in San Isidro, a heavy unease had settled over the villagers. Rumors of strange, terrifying sightings had made everyone wary of the night. 15-year-old Mariana Cortez hesitated as she stepped out of her family's modest hut. She needed a grapefruit from the small orchard just behind her home. A simple task on any other night. But tonight was different. The recent stories whispered among the villagers had planted a deep fear in her heart. The stories spoke of shadowy figures that stalked the outskirts of San Isidro. These beings were said to have glowing green eyes that pierced the darkness, watching silently from the shadows. The villagers called them Los Pelicaras, the face peelers. According to local legend, these sinister creatures were no ordinary animals or even human. The Pelicaras were said to kidnap people in the dead of night, mutilating their victims by peeling off their faces. Some elders claimed the creatures harvested the skin to sell on the black market, fueling gruesome tales that haunted every family. No one had ever seen them clearly, only those piercing, unnatural green eyes that glowed like fireflies trapped in darkness. Despite her fear, Mariana pushed herself forward. Her family depended on the small harvest from their garden. As she reached for a grapefruit hanging low on a branch, a sudden chill swept down her spine. From the dark shadows at the edge of the trees, two figures emerged. They were impossibly tall, their skin blending perfectly with the jungle night. The only thing visible were their haber eyes, two glowing, unblinking orbs of vivid green that locked onto Mariana's every move. Her breath caught in her throat. She froze, unable to move. The figures blocked her path, silent but threatening. One of them moved forward with an eerie, fluid motion, not walking, but gliding across the ground as if weightless. Before Mariana could cry out for help, the creatures grabbed her. One pinned her arms to the muddy earth, while the other pressed a razor-sharp knife against her throat. The cold steel sent a shiver of terror through her, but she refused to give in. She fought back with every ounce of strength she had, kicking, scratching, and screaming at the top of her lungs. The sound echoed through the jungle, a desperate plea in the silent night. Just as she felt her strength fading, distant voices and the rumble of motorbikes shattered the silence. The village night patrol, alerted by her screams, rushed to the scene with rifles raised and flashlights cutting through the darkness. But something impossible happened next. The Pelicaras did not flee. Instead, they slowly rose into the air, levitating several feet above the ground with a smooth, unnatural grace. The glowing green eyes remained fixed on Mariana, and the patrol, as bullets fired into the air, seemed to pass right through their forms. Within moments, the creatures disappeared into the canopy above, vanishing as mysteriously as they had appeared. In the following days, news of Mariana's terrifying encounter spread beyond San Isidro. The Peruvian government launched an official investigation, eager to quell the growing panic. Their conclusion was quick and straightforward. The attackers were illegal gold miners using experimental jetpacks and advanced body armor to intimidate the villagers and protect their clandestine mining operations deep in the jungle. According to officials, the green glow came from the special helmets, and the strange levitation was a trick of the jetpacks. But the people of San Isidro refused to accept this explanation. Many villagers insisted they had seen something far stranger than miners with gadgets. To them, the Pelicaras were real, creatures of the night, or perhaps even extraterrestrials drawn to the dense Amazon by unknown forces. Mariana herself remained shaken but determined. Her encounter left her with scars beyond the physical, an unshakable sense that the forest held secrets no one was meant to uncover. The legend of the Pelicaras grew stronger, and the villagers knew one thing for certain. The shadows of the jungle were watching, waiting, and sometimes they strike when you least expect it. Story 3. Esteban Vargas and the Haunted Woods. Esteban Vargas had always believed that the forest was his to know. For more than a decade, he had carved out a quiet existence among Patagonia's ancient woods, rising before dawn to the music of wind in the boughs and the chatter of Magellanic woodpeckers. Though the land stretched endless and wild, he knew its voice intimately. The small scurryings beneath the ferns, the distant call of a guanaco, the subtle change in the scent of the air before a storm. Life in the vast solitude suited him, and his reputation among the villagers of Puerto Verde was that of a man as tough and unshakable as the mountains themselves. But on May 21st, 1974, the wilderness revealed a secret to Esteban that would overturn even his sturdiest convictions. That morning began like countless others. Esteban pushed open the door of his cabin, letting in the sharp air. He strapped on his boots, shouldered his axe, and vanished into the trees as the first light painted the crown's gold. On such days, the forest felt almost like a cathedral, its silence deep and sacred. Yet even as he walked, a strange unease trailed him, a tingling on the back of his neck, as if he moved through a place he was no longer welcome. The people of Puerto Verde were no strangers to superstition. Huddled around their stoves, they would whisper about Los Monstruos, monstrous beings haunting the woodlands beyond the mapped trails. Stories were traded among wide-eyed children and weary elders alike. Enormous shadow shapes glimpsed through the trees, animal carcasses found oddly mutilated, restless dreams that seemed to gather under the waning moon. Esteban had heard these stories, but had always dismissed them as tales born of isolation and fear. Yet, logic began to waver that day, when Esteban, hacking through underbrush on the hunt for suitable timber, came upon an ancient coihu tree standing sentinel at the heart of a clearing. Its bark, which should have been unmarred, bore fresh, savage wounds. Deep claw marks, each as wide as his palm, raked up the trunk almost 10 feet from the ground. He reached out, tracing stunned fingers along the splintered grooves. They were not the marks of a big cat, nor a bear. The pattern was all wrong, and the power required was terrifying. He knelt beside the roots and found more signs. A print in the soft earth, wide and misshapen, suggesting something massive and bipedic. Whatever had passed here was no animal he recognized. Unease twisted in his gut. For a moment, he simply stood, listening, and the forest seemed to press closer, its silence expectant and watchful. Then a sound broke. Through the hush, a growl, low and resonant, rolling through the trees like distant thunder. Esteban's heart drummed painfully in his chest. He scanned the shadows, but nothing stirred. The canopy swayed high above, darkening in the world below. against reason, against the hard-earned skepticism of a man grown in wilderness, a tremor of fear sluiced through him. Throughout the day, the strangeness compounded. He found more oddities. Branches snapped and tossed in impossible directions. The carcass of a deer picked clean, but for its skull, hanging from a branch as though set there deliberately. At times, howls echoed in the distance, not the wild ululation of a wolf or fox, but a wailing, almost human sound, heavy with grief or longing. He turned back sooner than he meant, moving quickly without pausing to mark the trees or gather firewood. That night, inside his small cabin, Esteban fortified the doors and windows. The fire flickered as he sat in silence, clutching his old hunting rifle. The woods outside seemed to breathe with a life of their own, swelling and falling in unseen tides. Shadows shifted just beyond the reach of firelight. Once, he was sure he saw eyes, flickering with unnatural luminescence, watching him from the gloom. The protection of the cabin's walls felt tenuous. In that relentless darkness, he sensed the ancientness of the land, the layers of stories laid down by countless generations, the half-glimpsed truths that became legend. The next day, his composure unraveling, Esteban trekked to Puerto Verde. He found the elders clustered in the narrow plaza, faces lined by wind and worry. He told them of the scars on the tree, the unearthly growls, the enormous print. Their expressions darkened. One old woman, her hands trembling with age, nodded solemnly. The stories, she said, were not stories at all. For decades, villagers had seen glimpses of the beings at dusk, massive, misshapen forms, here and gone between the boles of ancient trees. Some called them spirits, the ancient guardians of the forest, punishing or protecting according to whims humans could not fathom. Others whispered that the creatures were much older and far stranger, intruders from a world that touched theirs only at the wildest edges. Esteban could sense their fear, see the shadows gathering behind their eyes. They urged him to move, to abandon his claim to the woods, to leave before worse befell him. But something stubborn and unresolved twisted inside him, a mix of curiosity, responsibility, and a connection to the land he could not sever. That night, he returned to the tree, this time with a lantern and notepad. Over the following weeks, he became both hunter and hunted, meticulously recording every sign. New claw marks, gouges in cabin walls, the loss of his 2 loyal dogs, who vanished into the trees one night and never returned. Some nights, he heard footsteps pacing outside, heavy and deliberate, sometimes lingering so long that Esteban could not sleep. He imagined the creatures outside, their breath visible in the cold, their massive shapes only barely hidden by the darkness. The man who had once known the forest as intimately as his own reflection was forced to admit its mystery, its unknowable depths. The woods were haunted, not just by monsters, but by riddles deeper than myth and older than memory. Years later, the story of Esteban Vargas remains. Locals point to the deep scars in the coihu trees untouched by time, and sometimes still whisper that Esteban walks the forest's edge, a man forever changed by what he dared to seek. In the end, for all his knowledge and courage, even Esteban learned that some secrets belong to the wilderness, and some shadows can never be chased away. The haunted woods hold their silence, and the line between legend and truth is often written in the marks we cannot explain.